Captain Jake Morrison stared at the message display on his ship's main screen and felt his stomach drop. The transmission had come from somewhere beyond human space, broadcast on frequencies that Earth science barely understood. The words were translated by their computer, but the meaning was clear enough to make his hands shake. The galaxy was dying. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and read the message again. The Galactic Federation, a group of 12 alien species that controlled most of the known galaxy, was asking for help, not from Earth's government or military, but from anyone willing to fight against something called the Devourers. The message painted a picture that sounded like something from a nightmare. Dr. Lisa Chang looked up from her research station where she had been studying samples of alien technology they had found drifting in space. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her lab coat was stained with various chemicals. She had been the one to decode the alien message using translation programs they had stolen from a crashed Federation scout ship years ago. "Jake, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight with worry. "I've been analyzing the data they sent with the message. These Devourers aren't just another enemy fleet. They're something much worse." Commander Alex Rivera entered the bridge at that moment, still wearing his flight suit from the patrol he had just finished. His short black hair was damp with sweat, and his brown eyes immediately focused on the tense atmosphere in the room. Alex had been a pilot in Earth's Defense Force before joining the crew of the Terra's Hope, and his combat instincts were always sharp. "What's the situation, Captain?" Alex asked, moving to stand beside Jake's command chair. Jake gestured to the main screen where Lisa had put up her analysis. "The galaxy has a problem, and apparently they think we might be able to help solve it." The Terra's Hope was not an impressive ship by galactic standards. It was a human research vessel, built from steel and powered by fusion engines that the aliens probably considered primitive. The ship was only 300 meters long and carried a crew of 42 humans. Compared to the massive Federation warships that could stretch for kilometers, the Terra's Hope looked like a toy, but it was humanity's only interstellar ship, and right now it might be the galaxy's last hope. Lisa's analysis showed recordings from Federation battles against the Devourers. The enemy ships looked like a nightmare fusion of metal and living tissue. They moved in perfect formation, as if controlled by a single mind. Worse, they seemed to learn from every battle. Tactics that worked once never worked again. "Look at this," Lisa said, pointing to a section of the data. "The Federation has tried everything. Energy weapons, kinetic bombardment, biological warfare, even dimensional attacks. Nothing works for long. The Devourers adapt to every strategy within hours." Alex studied the battle recordings with a pilot's eye for detail. "They move like a school of fish," he observed. "Perfect coordination, instant reaction to threats. But that also means that they think like a computer." Jake finished, understanding where Alex was going. "They predict what their enemies will do based on logic and pattern recognition." The three humans stood in silence for a moment, considering the implications. The Federation species were all highly advanced, their military strategies based on mathematical precision and logical analysis. Their ships moved in perfect formations, their attacks followed optimal patterns, and their defenses were calculated to maximum efficiency. And all of it had failed. "So they want humans because we're unpredictable," Lisa said slowly. "Because we don't always do the logical thing." Jake nodded. The Federation had discovered Earth 50 years ago, but had never invited humans to join their alliance. The official reason was that humanity was too primitive and violent. The real reason, Jake suspected, was that humans made the orderly alien minds uncomfortable. Humans were chaotic, emotional, and often irrational. Now those same qualities might be exactly what the galaxy needed. "Captain," came a voice from the communication station. "We're receiving another transmission. This one's more direct." The screen changed to show an alien face unlike anything any of the humans had seen before. The being had crystalline features that seemed to glow with internal light, and when it spoke, the translation came through in a voice filled with desperate authority. "I am Admiral Kethavar of the Vorthok Fleet Command. Human vessel. If you are receiving this message, then you represent the last hope for our galaxy. The Devourers have consumed 3 of our core worlds and will reach the Federation capital within days. Our military strategies have proven useless against their adaptive intelligence." The alien's expression was difficult to read, but the strain in his translated voice was clear. "High Chancellor Mordeth has authorized me to offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Federation, along with access to all our technology and resources, in exchange for your assistance in this war. We know your species was rejected before, but circumstances have changed. We need minds that think differently than ours. Jake looked at his crew. Alex was already checking weapon systems and plotting possible courses to Federation space. Lisa was diving deeper into the Devourer data, her scientific mind racing to find weaknesses that pure logic had missed. Admiral Kethvar, Jake said, activating the reply channel. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Terra's Hope. We'll need coordinates to your position and all available data on Devourer tactics and technology. He paused, then added, And Admiral, you might want to warn your fleet commanders that human tactics don't follow standard military doctrine. We tend to improvise. There was a long pause before Admiral Kethvar replied. Captain Morrison, at this point, improvisation may be exactly what we need. Transmitting coordinates now. The fate of 12 civilizations rests with you. As the Terra's Hope changed course toward Federation space, Jake Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. A human research ship with a crew of 42 was about to enter a war that had already destroyed fleets numbering in the thousands. But for the first time since the message had arrived, Jake felt something that might have been hope. The Federation had tried logic, precision, and overwhelming force. All of it had failed against an enemy that could predict and counter every rational strategy. Maybe it was time to try something completely irrational. The Terra's Hope dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Nexus Prime system, and Jake Morrison immediately understood why the Federation was losing the war. The space around the fortress world was filled with thousands of massive alien warships, each one perfectly positioned in geometric formations that stretched for millions of kilometers. Everything was precise, orderly, and absolutely predictable. My God, Alex whispered from the pilot's seat. Look at the size of those ships. The Federation flagship was a crystal structure that looked like a floating city. Its faceted hull caught the light of the system's star and threw rainbows across space. Next to it, ships from 11 other species maintained perfect formation. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, some biological, others mechanical, and a few that seemed to exist partially in other dimensions. The Terra's Hope, with its gray metal hull and simple design, looked like a primitive boat floating next to luxury cruise liners. Terra's Hope, this is Federation Control, came a voice over the communication channel. You are cleared to dock with the command station. Admiral Kethvar is waiting to meet with you. Jake guided their ship through the maze of Federation vessels, noting how every ship maintained exact distances from its neighbors. Even their docking approach followed a precise pattern that had probably been calculated to optimize traffic flow and minimize collision risk. The command station was larger than most Earth cities. When Jake, Alex, and Lisa stepped off their shuttle, they found themselves in a vast hall filled with beings from across the galaxy. Crystalline Vorthax stood next to insectoid Zephyrians, while gaseous Netherians floated in containment suits designed to hold their atmospheric bodies. Admiral Kethvar approached them, his crystal features reflecting the station's lights. Up close, Jake could see that the alien's body was made of some kind of living mineral that pulsed with soft blue energy. When he spoke, the translation came through speakers built into his crystalline chest. Captain Morrison, the Admiral said, his tone carrying barely concealed doubt. I must admit your ship is smaller than I expected. Our intelligence reports suggested that human vessels were more substantial. We're not much to look at, Jake agreed, but sometimes the best solutions come in small packages. Admiral Kethvar led them to a massive strategic planning room where holographic displays showed the current state of the war. The news was worse than Jake had imagined. 3 entire star systems had been consumed by the Devourers, their planets stripped of all matter and converted into more enemy ships. Show them the battle recordings, Admiral Kethvar said to one of his staff officers. The holographic display changed to show a recent engagement. Federation ships moved in perfect formation, their attacks coordinated with mathematical precision. Energy beams lanced out in calculated patterns while kinetic weapons followed optimal trajectories. It was beautiful to watch, like a deadly ballet performed by masters of their craft, and it was completely useless. The Devourer ships responded to every Federation tactic within seconds. When the aliens adjusted their strategy, the enemy adapted even faster. It was like watching someone play chess against a computer that could think 1,000 moves ahead. They learn, Lisa said, studying the data with scientific fascination. Every time you use a tactic, they analyze it and develop a counter. How long does this adaptation process take? Minutes, replied a Zephyrian general whose insect-like features clicked with agitation. Sometimes seconds. We have used every strategy in our databases and all have failed. Alex was studying the enemy ship movements with a pilot's eye. They move like they're all controlled by the same brain, he observed. No individual initiative, no random actions. Everything follows a pattern. Jake felt an idea forming. What if that's their weakness? Admiral Kethovar's crystal features shifted in what might have been confusion. I do not understand. Their coordination is perfect. How can that be a weakness? Because perfect coordination requires perfect prediction, Jake explained. They can counter your strategies because your strategies are logical. They follow patterns that can be analyzed and predicted. The room fell silent as the assembled alien commanders tried to process this concept. To them, logic and pattern-based strategy were the foundations of all military science. The idea of deliberately acting illogically was almost incomprehensible. You're suggesting we be unpredictable, said an Etherian officer, its gaseous form swirling with what looked like distress. But unpredictability leads to chaos. Chaos leads to defeat. Not if you do it right, Alex said, understanding where Jake was going. Controlled chaos. Unpredictable tactics that still serve a strategic purpose. Lisa was already pulling up data on her portable computer. Look at this, she said, highlighting sections of the Devourer analysis. Their collective intelligence operates like a massive computer network. It processes information and makes predictions based on logical analysis. She paused, then continued with growing excitement. But what happens when you feed a computer system data that doesn't follow logical patterns? What happens when the input is genuinely random? System overload, Jake said with a grin. The computer crashes trying to find patterns that don't exist. Admiral Kethovar was quiet for a long moment, his crystal form pulsing with different colors as he considered this unprecedented idea. Finally, he spoke. You are proposing that we deliberately make our forces less efficient in order to confuse the enemy. I'm proposing that we make our forces unpredictable, Jake corrected. There's a difference between being inefficient and being chaotic. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Federation military doctrine was based on thousands of years of successful warfare, using logical, coordinated strategies. The idea of abandoning those principles in favor of human-style chaos was revolutionary and terrifying. Finally, High Chancellor Mordeth himself arrived to settle the matter. The leader of the Galactic Federation was a tall, graceful being whose species Jake didn't recognize. His skin seemed to shift between different colors, and his eyes held the weight of someone who had watched his civilization's greatest achievements crumble. Captain Morrison, the Chancellor said, our conventional forces have failed completely. If you believe human tactics can succeed where ours have not, then I authorize a test of your theories. Admiral Kethovar's crystal form flashed with alarm. Chancellor, with respect, we cannot risk our remaining forces on unproven theories. We will start small, the Chancellor replied. Captain Morrison, you will take command of a small squadron. 3 ships, your vessel, and 2 of our escorts. There is a Devourer scouting force in the outer system. If your methods can defeat them, we will consider implementing them on a larger scale. Jake felt his heart racing. They were actually going to get a chance to test their theory against real enemy forces. We'll need time to brief the escort commanders on human tactical doctrine. You have 6 hours, Admiral Kethovar said grimly. The scout force will reach sensor range by then. Captain Morrison, I hope your chaos theory proves more effective than our order, because if it doesn't, we may have just lost our last chance to save the galaxy. The Devourer scout force appeared on sensors exactly when Admiral Kethovar had predicted. 5 ships, each one a twisted fusion of metal and organic tissue that pulsed with dark energy. They moved in perfect formation, their approach calculated to arrive at Nexus Prime in exactly 47 minutes. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra's Hope, watching the enemy ships grow larger on the tactical display. Behind him were the 2 Federation escort vessels that High Chancellor Mordeth had assigned to his squadron. The Vorthak ship Crystal Flame and the Zephyrian vessel Swarm Song had crews that were still struggling to understand human tactical doctrine. All ships, this is Captain Morrison. Jake said into his communicator. Remember what we discussed. Throw out everything you know about proper formation flying. Today we're going to be completely unpredictable. The reply from the Crystal Flames commander was filled with barely contained anxiety. Captain Morrison, our tactical computers are calculating a 67% probability of collision if we abandon formation protocols. Trust your pilots, not your computers, Alex said from the pilot's seat. We're about to show these devourers what happens when they try to predict human behavior. Lisa was monitoring the enemy ships from her science station. Jake, they're starting their analysis routine. I can detect scanning beams trying to map our approach patterns. Perfect, Jake said with a grin. Let's give them something interesting to analyze. All ships execute pattern chaos. What happened next would have given any Federation tactical officer nightmares. The Terra's Hope suddenly accelerated straight toward the largest Devourer ship, then at the last second veered off in a direction that made no strategic sense. The crystal flame began spinning while firing its energy weapons in seemingly random directions. The swarm song split into 3 separate sections and started flying in different directions entirely. On every Federation ship watching from Nexus Prime, tactical computers began flashing error messages as they tried to predict what the human-led squadron would do next. The Devourer ships hesitated for the first time anyone could remember. Their collective intelligence was receiving data that didn't fit any known pattern. Human ships were supposed to follow logical attack formations, but these vessels were moving like they were being piloted by beings who had never heard of military strategy. They're trying to compensate, Lisa reported, watching her instruments. The enemy scanning intensity just increased by 400%. They're desperate to find a pattern they can predict. Jake keyed his communicator again. All ships, time for Phase 2. Execute the confused butterfly maneuver. Alex couldn't help but laugh as he put the Terra's Hope into a flight pattern that looked like a drunken insect. The ship spiraled, dove, climbed, and suddenly reversed direction for no apparent reason. Meanwhile, the crystal flame began firing its weapons at empty space while broadcasting human music at maximum volume. The swarm song's 3 sections started chasing each other in circles. The Devourer collective intelligence trying to process this chaotic behavior began to slow its decision-making process. Ships that normally moved with perfect coordination started to drift apart as their central control system struggled to predict targets that refused to follow any logical pattern. Jake, look at this, Lisa said excitedly. Their reaction time is dropping. The collective intelligence is getting bogged down trying to analyze our movements. Time for the finale, Jake said. All ships execute the impossible angle attack. The 3 ships of Jake's squadron suddenly converged on the Devourer formation from 3 different directions simultaneously. But instead of attacking the logical targets, they focused their fire on empty space between the enemy vessels. To any rational observer, it looked like they were deliberately missing. The Devourer ships moved to avoid the apparently misdirected fire, following evasion patterns calculated to keep them safe from attacks that weren't actually aimed at them. In doing so, they moved directly into the real attack that Jake had planned from the beginning. The Terra's Hope, Crystal Flame, and Swarm Song had been using their chaotic movements to position themselves for a coordinated strike that the enemy's collective intelligence couldn't predict because it made no logical sense. When they finally fired their real attack, all their weapons converged on a single point at exactly the same time. The largest Devourer ship exploded in a burst of dark energy and organic debris. The 4 remaining enemy vessels, their collective intelligence reeling from the loss of a major processing node, began to move erratically themselves. They're confused, Alex observed with satisfaction. Their own network is starting to behave unpredictably. Jake pressed the advantage. All ships maintain chaotic patterns. Don't let them regain their coordination. What followed was the strangest space battle in galactic history. Human and Federation ships moved in patterns that violated every principle of tactical science, while Devourer vessels tried desperately to adapt to an enemy that refused to be predictable. Every time the collective intelligence thought it had found a pattern, the human-led squadron would change tactics completely. One by one, the remaining Devourer ships fell. Each victory came not from superior firepower or advanced technology, but from the simple fact that the enemy couldn't predict what would happen next. When the last enemy vessel exploded, the space around Nexus Prime fell silent. For the first time in months, a Federation force had achieved a complete victory against the Devourers without losing a single ship. Terra's hope. "This is Admiral Kethvar," came the transmission from the flagship. The Vorthak commander's voice carried a tone of amazement that the translation software struggled to convey. "Captain Morrison, what you have accomplished should have been impossible." Jake wiped sweat from his forehead and looked around the bridge. Alex was grinning like he'd just won the greatest prize in the galaxy. Lisa was already analyzing the battle data, her scientific mind racing to understand exactly how their victory had worked. "Admiral," Jake replied, "sometimes the impossible is just another word for unpredictable. The Devourers can adapt to any logical strategy, but they can't adapt to pure chaos." There was a long pause before Admiral Kethvar responded. "Captain Morrison, High Chancellor Mordeth wishes to meet with you immediately. It appears we have much to learn about human tactical doctrine." As the Terra's Hope headed back to the command station, Jake realized that everything was about to change. The Federation had just discovered that their greatest enemy could be defeated, but only by embracing the one thing their ordered minds had always rejected. The galaxy was about to learn the power of controlled chaos, and humanity was going to be the teacher. The main Devourer fleet arrived 3 days later, and this time Jake Morrison was ready for them. Word of the human victory against the Scout Force had spread through the Federation fleet like wildfire, and for the first time in months, there was hope in the eyes of alien commanders who had grown used to defeat. High Chancellor Mordeth had called an emergency meeting of all fleet commanders, and the massive conference room was filled with beings from 12 different species. Jake stood at the center of the room feeling very small next to creatures that towered over him, or floated in specialized atmospheric suits. "Explain to us again how this works," said General Zixthala, her insectoid features clicking with nervous energy. "Your tactical doctrine appears to violate every principle of military science." Jake looked around the room at faces that represented thousands of years of galactic civilization. These beings had built empires that spanned star systems, developed technologies that could manipulate space and time, and created art and philosophy that Earth couldn't even imagine. And now they were asking a human to teach them how to fight. "The Devourers think like a computer," Jake explained for the 5th time that day. "They analyze data, find patterns, and make predictions. But what happens when you feed a computer completely random data?" An Etherian officer swirled thoughtfully in its containment suit. "The computer would attempt to find patterns that do not exist, using increasing amounts of processing power until system efficiency drops dramatically." "Exactly," Lisa said from her position beside Jake. "We've studied the data from our battle with the Scout Force. The Devourer collective intelligence showed clear signs of system overload when trying to process our chaotic tactics." Admiral Kethvar's crystal form pulsed with conflicting colors. "But how do we coordinate thousands of ships using random tactics? How do we ensure our forces don't accidentally attack each other?" Alex stepped forward, his pilot's instincts helping him explain the concept. "It's not random tactics, Admiral. It's controlled chaos. Every ship has a mission, but the way they accomplish that mission is unpredictable." He activated a holographic display showing the Federation fleet. "Think of it like jazz music. Every musician knows the song they're playing, but they're free to improvise their individual parts. The result is coordinated but unpredictable." The room fell silent as the alien commanders tried to process this concept. For species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of precise coordination, the idea of deliberate improvisation was almost impossible to grasp. Finally, High Chancellor Mordeth spoke. "Captain Morrison, the main Devourer fleet will arrive within hours. They outnumber us 50 to 1, and their ships are individually more powerful than ours. Can your chaos theory work on such a large scale?" Jake felt the weight of 12 civilizations resting on his shoulders. "Chancellor, I won't lie to you. What we're about to attempt has never been tried before, but conventional tactics have already failed against this enemy. Sometimes you have to try something crazy." The next few hours were controlled madness as Jake, Alex, and Lisa worked with Federation commanders to adapt human chaos theory to alien military doctrine. Vorthak energy specialists learned how to fire their weapons in seemingly random patterns that would converge at predetermined points. Zephyrian bioships practiced splitting into multiple smaller vessels that could move independently. Even the massive Netherian dimensional ships learned to phase in and out of normal space unpredictably. When the Devourer main fleet finally appeared on long-range sensors, Jake stood on the bridge of the Terra's Hope and marveled at the size of the enemy force. Thousands of biomechanical ships stretched across space like a dark plague, each one pulsing with the collective intelligence that had conquered half the galaxy. "All ships," Jake said into the fleet communication channel. "This is Captain Morrison. Remember what we've practiced. Trust your instincts, not your computers. Make choices that don't make sense. Today we're going to teach the galaxy that sometimes the best strategy is no strategy at all." The Battle of Nexus Prime began with the most chaotic fleet maneuver in galactic history. Instead of forming the traditional battle lines that the Devourers expected, Federation ships scattered in all directions like startled fish. Some vessels charged directly at the enemy fleet while others seemed to retreat. Energy weapons fired at empty space while kinetic projectiles followed impossible trajectories. The Devourer collective intelligence, faced with analyzing the movements of 2,000 ships all acting independently, began to slow its response time. The enemy formation, which had maintained perfect coordination for months of warfare, started to develop gaps as the central control system struggled to process the chaotic Federation behavior. "Jake, it's working," Lisa reported from her science station. "The enemy's reaction time is dropping significantly. Their collective intelligence is using too much processing power, trying to find patterns in our movements." What followed was 4 minutes of the most beautiful and terrifying combat the galaxy had ever seen. Federation ships danced through space in patterns that defied logic, their movements coordinated by intuition rather than calculation. Weapons fired in sequences that seemed random, but somehow always found their targets. Ships that appeared to be retreating would suddenly reverse course and attack from unexpected angles. The Devourer fleet, operating as a single networked intelligence, began to tear itself apart as its collective consciousness overloaded, trying to process the chaos. Ships that had moved in perfect formation for centuries started colliding with each other as their central control system issued contradictory commands. In exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds, the largest military force the galaxy had ever assembled was reduced to drifting wreckage. The Devourer collective intelligence, unable to adapt to pure chaos, had suffered a complete system failure. The silence that followed was broken by High Chancellor Mordeth's voice over the fleet communication channel. "All ships, this is the Chancellor. The enemy has been defeated. The threat to our galaxy has ended." Jake slumped in his command chair, exhausted by the intensity of coordinating such massive chaos. Around him, Alex and Lisa were grinning with relief and amazement. They had done it. Humanity had saved the galaxy not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple power of unpredictability. "Captain Morrison," came Admiral Kethvar's voice, filled with something that sounded like awe. "In 4 minutes you have accomplished what our combined fleets could not achieve in months of warfare." Jake activated his communicator. "Admiral, we couldn't have done it without your ships and crews. Today the galaxy learned that sometimes the best solution is the one that doesn't make sense." As the Federation fleet began rescue operations and damage assessment, Jake realized that everything was about to change. Humanity had just proven that their chaotic nature wasn't a flaw to be corrected, but a strength to be celebrated. The galaxy would never be the same. 1 year after the Battle of Nexus Prime, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Federation flagship and watched the most unusual fleet exercise in galactic history. Ships from 13 different species moved through space in patterns that would have horrified military strategists just 2 years ago. But now these chaotic formations were considered the height of tactical excellence. The Terra's Hope, now upgraded with Federation technology but still maintaining its human crew, led a squadron of mixed vessels through a training exercise that looked more like an elaborate dance than a military maneuver. Vorthak crystal ships spun through impossible spirals while Zephyrian biovessels split and merged in unpredictable patterns. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Admiral Kethvar, approaching Jake with his crystal form now shifting through colors that Jake had learned indicated contentment. The Vorthak commander had become Jake's closest friend among the alien species, their partnership bridging the gap between logical precision and creative chaos. Jake nodded, still amazed by how much the galaxy had changed. A year ago, watching ships move like that would have given Federation commanders heart attacks. Now it's standard operating procedure. The transformation had been remarkable. After the defeat of the Devourers, High Chancellor Mordeth had formally invited Earth to join the Galactic Federation as its 13th member. But more than that, he had asked humanity to help reshape Federation society itself. Dr. Lisa Chang had established research centers on 12 different worlds, teaching alien scientists how to incorporate controlled randomness into their experiments. The results had been revolutionary. Crystalline Vorthak engineers had learned to create energy patterns that shifted unpredictably, making their technology more robust and adaptable. Zephyrian biologists had discovered that living systems actually performed better with slight irregularities, leading to medical breakthroughs that had extended lifespans across multiple species. The latest report from Dr. Chang is fascinating, Admiral Kethvar said, pulling up a holographic display. The Netherians have found that their dimensional physics actually becomes more stable when subjected to controlled chaos. They're calling it the Morrison principle, Jake laughed. I still can't believe they named a scientific principle after me. A year ago, I was just a cargo ship captain, trying to make a living hauling supplies between Earth colonies. Commander Alex Rivera joined them on the observation deck, wearing the uniform of the new Interspecies Military Academy, where he now served as Director of Tactical Innovation. His job was to train cadets from 13 different worlds in the art of controlled chaos, and he had discovered that some species had a natural talent for unpredictability that even surprised humans. The training exercise is going well, Alex reported. The Zephyrian cadets are particularly good at split-second tactical changes. Apparently their insect biology gives them faster reaction times than most species. And the Vorthak students? Jake asked. Alex grinned. They're struggling with the concept of making decisions without calculating all possible outcomes first. But when they finally let go of pure logic, they come up with some incredibly creative solutions. The changes weren't limited to military and scientific applications. Federation society itself had begun to embrace concepts that would have been unthinkable before humanity joined their ranks. Art had become more experimental, with alien artists learning to incorporate elements of randomness and emotional expression. Trade routes had been deliberately made irregular to prevent piracy, and even government decisions now included controlled variables to prevent stagnation. Earth had become a pilgrimage destination for Federation citizens seeking to understand the source of chaos theory. Human universities welcomed exchange students from across the galaxy, while Earth cities had grown to accommodate visitors who came to study human unpredictability. The planet that had once been considered too primitive for galactic civilization was now seen as the wellspring of revolutionary thinking. Admiral Morrison, came a voice from the ship's communication system. We're receiving a priority transmission from long-range sensors. Jake, Alex, and Admiral Kethvar made their way to the bridge where High Chancellor Mordeth was already waiting. The leader of the Galactic Federation had aged visibly over the past year, but his eyes held a confidence that hadn't been there during the dark days of the Devourer War. What do we have, Chancellor? Jake asked. High Chancellor Mordeth activated the main display, showing sensor readings from the galaxy's edge. Long-range scans have detected artificial signals from beyond our galactic boundary. It appears we are not alone in the universe. The implications were staggering. Other galaxies, other civilizations, possibly other threats that the Federation might have to face. A year ago, such news would have filled the room with dread. But now Jake felt only curiosity and excitement. Are they hostile? Alex asked. Unknown, the Chancellor replied. The signals are too distant to analyze properly. But they are definitely artificial and definitely moving in our direction. Admiral Kethvar's crystal form pulsed with thoughtful colors. A year ago, such news would have terrified us. We would have immediately begun preparing defensive strategies and calculating optimal fleet deployments. And now? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. Now we have something no enemy can predict or counter, High Chancellor Mordeth said with what might have been a smile. We have 13 different species working together using principles of controlled chaos. We have learned that the best solutions often come from the most unexpected directions. Jake looked around the bridge at the faces of beings from across the galaxy. Crystalline Vorthak, insectoid Zephyrians, gaseous Netherians, and dozens of other species all working together in harmony. And at the center of it all were humans, the species that had once been rejected for being too chaotic and unpredictable. Well then, Jake said, moving to the command chair that High Chancellor Mordeth had offered him. I guess it's time to start preparing for our next impossible victory. As the Federation fleet moved into new formations that combined mathematical precision with creative chaos, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that desperate message had reached the Terra's Hope. Humanity had not only saved the galaxy, but had fundamentally transformed it. The 4 minutes that had changed the galaxy forever had become the foundation for a new age of exploration and discovery. Whatever challenges awaited them from beyond the galactic rim, Jake was confident that the combined might of 13 species thinking in ways that no enemy could predict would be ready. After all, the galaxy had learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer. Sometimes the best strategy is no strategy at all, and the greatest strength comes from embracing the beautiful chaos of infinite possibility. The Terra's Hope led the fleet toward whatever new adventure awaited them, its human crew ready to teach the universe that there was no problem, so complex that it couldn't be solved with a little creativity, a lot of courage, and the willingness to try something that had never been done before. The galaxy was no longer a place of rigid order and predictable patterns. It had become something far more interesting, a place where anything was possible,